Good afternoon, everyone. Let us start with a small prayer. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Sutra Bhashya Pranetaro Vedantabja Prabhakaro Vande Parasparatmano Padarayana Shankaro. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to everyone. I am Manu Kashyap from Advaita Academy. I welcome you all to session 2 of Sri Venkatramanji's Panchadashi, a meaningful daily routine. In the morning session, Venkatramanji provided a 360 overview of Vedanta. He took us through who is a Jiva, what is the relation of Ishvara, Brahman, what is manifestation, why are we drowning in the ocean of samsara, what is the cause of ignorance, and so on. Now, Venkatramanji will continue to elaborate on Panchadashi, a meaningful daily routine. Viewers, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box and not in chat box. Venkatramanji will be taking up those questions towards the end of the session. Venkatramanji, please start your session.
Shankarupena marchittam pankekritamabodhyaya kinkariyasa samaya Shankaracharyamashraye. Namaste to all of you, and thanks for joining this afternoon session. We will just continue from where we left in the morning. We discussed about the 7 steps enshrined in the Panchadasi, from, say, ignorance to salvation. Now, what are the means to achieve it? And can something be resorted to or practiced as a matter of a daily routine? Because that alone can help us as one who has the thirst and the desire to inquire into this. Now, we therefore need to understand there are 2 verticals in which one can pursue this holy path of salvation. But before that, we touched upon what is called as the God-made duality and the man-made duality. And in one of the questions raised in the morning, we addressed saying that God-made duality is a creation, is a manifestation done by Ishvara, and therefore it cannot be dissolved or destroyed. And there is no need to do that, because attaining the state of a Jivan Mukta is an individual pursuit. And once somebody attains that state of salvation, the whole universe looks illusory for such a person. The world will continue to exist for the rest, but not for him. Or even if it exists, he will be or she will be indifferent to it. Right. Now, in this God-made duality, God provides 2 broad baskets of dispensation. Ishvara provides 2 broad baskets of dispensation. One basket is filled completely with mundane, universal, earthly pleasures and pain, which we dealt in the morning as the samsara chakra. Keep on enjoying life and keep on undergoing pain based on your prarabdha. So there will be no inquiry about God, no inquiry or a serious pursuit about Vedanta, about Brahman, nothing. From dawn to dusk and from 24/7, 365 days, you will only be in worldly pursuits. Whether it is right or wrong, it's the choice of the individual. Vedanta, see, when it comes to religious, in Karma Kanda, this is right, this is wrong, that will be taught to you. But in Vedanta, it's very dispassionate. If you don't want to pursue that, you don't want to pursue that. That it leaves it there. So one basket is filled with a lot of distractions in this world, which one can pursue. There is a second basket Ishvara creates. This basket is filled with Guru, Vedanta, and various texts and sacred books for you to understand and pursue. So, you broadly classify them as Shastric texts and non-Shastric pursuits. We'll put it from a Vedantic perspective. These are the two broad baskets available in this universe. Now, the tendency of every human being, every jiva, is ultimately to remain happy. So, when it comes to happiness, now, how do we achieve that happiness is very, very important. Remember, worldly happiness, you ask, Vedanta puts the following instances and making you to probe and find an answer. Let's take the relationship of a husband and wife. Now, the husband loves the wife, and the wife equally loves the husband, if not more. So Vedanta puts a question for whose joy, enjoyment, or happiness. Now, a father takes the child and starts scratching the child's soft skin through his mustache. For whose joy and happiness does he do it? Precious stones are available in the market. There is an attachment to it and an ability to buy and feel happy about it. For whose happiness is it purchased? For the benefit of the person who buys it, or for the benefit of the gem or the precious stone? A cart pulled by bullocks carry a cartload, very heavy cartload, from one destination to another. For whose benefit and whose happiness does this happen? An aspirant wishes to be anywhere between Swargaloka to Brahmaloka. For whose happiness does he do? For the benefit of that loka or for him or her? We propitiate and we pray and we worship so many deities and do so many rituals. For whose benefit? For the benefit of the deity or for our benefit? Take the case of a master and servant relationship. The servant is happy because master is paying. The master is happy because the servant is he is able to extract work from the servant. For whose happiness does each one do the work? So Vedanta puts the question here, whose happiness is paramount? And says happiness can be in 4 forms. Happiness of the Atma, we'll come to that. That's exactly the destination we have to reach. If you exclude that, then this non-shastric worldly life gives you 3 types of happiness. Subservient happiness, hatred, and indifference. What do you mean by subservient happiness? Anything from the life breath to the whole wealth of this world. Anything mundane which can make you happy is subservient happiness. Why is it subservient happiness? It is of an inferior degree compared to the bliss that Atma can give to us. Atma can exhibit. Why it gives? It doesn't give, it exhibits. Now the second is hatred. Seeing a lion suddenly, then what happens? Even lion or a tiger in a dream instills fear in us. And 3, if the same lion or tiger, as you go through a zoo in a car to watch it, if it is facing some other direction, then indifference. And if you are so good and capable training the lion or the cub, then it becomes subservient. What could be a matter of hatred can be a matter which can bring under subservient happiness. So the life cycle travels within these three nodes again and again and again. And what does Bhagavad Gita say? Which one? I mean, Panchadasi is nothing but a condensation, an essence of all the Prasthanatra. So any jiva which is attached to the objects of this universe out of desire will slowly lead to, say, fear of losing, fear of possession, and anger. Whenever they are not able to translate their desire into performance or action. And most importantly, ultimately take the human mind to a state of delusion. What you call it, either Muda or Murga. See, delusion is a state which all of us in our daily lives enter into knowingly or unknowingly, but something which, if you are an aspirant of Vedanta, should shun it. Should somehow pray with your guru to first not get deluded or minimize the delusion as much as possible. Worldly pursuits ultimately lead to delusion. Now, what do you mean by delusion? Ahankara and Mamakara. Ahankara comes out of ego, which is so natural because the superimposition of the reflected self on the pure self or the real self emits the identity of I, the ego. So till the reflected self is killed, ego will not vanish from our system. Somebody says, I'm not egoistic, he's just bluffing. Till it is cracked, ego will remain. Because reflected self character has that, Maya has put that feature into this domain. But delusion is a matter of option. Ego with the mind, with a deceived mind, a corrupted mind, an impure mind, a mind which is deprived, depleted, dismissed, puts us into a state of delusion. What do you mean by delusion? Something which for everyone looks impossible, improbable, should not be done, prohibited, short. For a deluded person, it will look exactly the opposite. He or she will feel, what is wrong in doing this? Something which is so unacceptable, something which is so prohibited, something which one cannot dream in one's life. Someone in a state of delusion is bound to do it. So, mind bondage samsara in the absence of trying to crack the ignorance, as your punyas keep depleting, will land us in a state of acrimony, state of delusion, where it will become extremely difficult to be built. We will be simply stuck. So, in this God created duality, if somebody is going to be only leading a non-shastric life, they will all say, we are pious, we are noble, we are paying taxes, we are so respect the society. All that will, in the one day or the another, lead to anger and lead to delusion. Because they are not rooted to the real self. They don't go near it. On the contrary, in the God-created reality, if you are going to enter into the other basket of Guru, Vedas, Vedanta, epics, books, texts, and pursue holding the feet of a Guru, Vedanta Marga, then the occurrences of delusion will reduce. The occurrences of anger will reduce. Desire will reduce. Attachment to object will reduce. Then you will start looking at the same objects indifferently. Therefore, there is a need to get into this basket of life. In our daily routine, how much time and priority do we show? So we'll all say from morning till night, I have so much work. Vedanta says, doesn't matter. If you're serious about it, you can do it. You can. Now, to finish the concept of happiness, before we go, there are three broad categories of happiness. Three broad. See, all this is for normal understanding, for an aspirant to be convinced about. One happiness is what we saw: hatred and indifference. This is one worldly happiness. The second category of happiness is the happiness all of us get every day when we get into deep sleep. It's an absolute state of happiness. Absolute. But when you say absolute, it's relative absolute, because in terms of that is not a stage where you realize. We are not a realized soul there. We are a calm soul, a peaceful soul, but not a realized soul. Now, this state of happiness is explained so beautifully in Vedanta. Why? Because it is that state where one is in the Anandamaya kosha. So we saw 5 koshas: Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Manonmaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha. But I said I will reserve Anandamaya kosha for the afternoon. Anandamaya kosha is nothing but when mind and the buddhi melts and has no activities. That melted state is called Anandamaya. It is not one more separate kosha. So the jiva, which gets reflected, namely the unreal self, which gets reflected, which conceals the actual Brahman. The reflected Brahman, which conceals the pure Brahman. During waking stage and dream stage, this reflection is always on the buddhi, therefore ego dominates. But in the sleeping stage, the reflection happens in the Anandamaya kosha, because mind and buddhi is silent. It's at peace. So there is Ananda. So bliss emerges very clearly as a witness, and Anandamaya experiences it as an enjoyer. That is why when we wake up the next day, we clearly say we had a wonderful sleep. Who is saying that? Anandamaya kosha says that. And the moment we wake up, then the melted pot solidifies like a butter and ghee. It solidifies and emerges back as Vijnanamaya kosha and Manonmaya kosha. So this is the second type of happiness. You are almost near it, but you have still not cracked it. Because next day when you wake up, it solidifies. So it's temporary happiness, but real state of peace. And therefore Vedanta says there is a third category. See, subservient happiness, hatred, indifference, all is over. Yeah? That's called happiness of the Atma, Anandamaya, Anandam of Atma, eternal bliss of the Atma. This category is extremely exceptional and specific and special and unique for the simple reason it does not fall under the first two categories. Experiencing this bliss will eradicate everything around you, will make you look everything as illusory and indifferent. And you will not go into the cycle of happiness and sorrow, pain and pleasure. Duality is lost. So this is the third category of happiness which one can think of. And if an ignorant mind, but an aspire with faith, fourth stage, which is what we are all thinking about, if we can understand that there is this type of a happiness, and therefore we should put our heart and soul in pursuing this happiness, Vedanta teaches you the mode to reach that happiness. This is precisely what we should now look into as the ways. Because achieving peace at sleep is temporary. Achieving pleasures and pain in an earthly world is illusory. Achieving permanent bliss, imperishable bliss, is a possibility. How? Like breaking the mirror, which will throw the rays out. Breaking the Mula Avidya allows you to realize that you are nothing but verily the Brahman. So how do you do it? Now here I have to briefly describe, because even though Panchadasi doesn't deal it in directly, but it does refer to it. See, Gita refers to the four margas: Bhakti Marga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. Bhakti and Karma cleanses the mind. It doesn't dissolve or eradicate the mind or its impressions. Dissolution of mind cannot happen out of bhakti or out of karma. They can only purify. But all of us have to give due importance to these two margas. Either you cultivate the habit of worship, names and forms, or else do your work as worship for you to attain Chitta Shuddhi. Now, what do you mean by names and forms? Vedanta says, take mud, convert it into a pot. How does mud become a pot? It's a wonder. For example, if you take dry mud and try to make it into a pot, it doesn't happen. So the mud has to be wet. Wet mud alone is capable of becoming the pot. So the potency of the mud lies in its wetness for it to assume a form called pot. Then you break that, pound that pot to the minutest particle. It returns back as mud. Take gold, melt it, prepare any jewel of your choice to make you feel happy. You can do it. And melt the jewel, it returns back to the state of gold. So Vedanta puts a question. Mud, pot, restoration as mud. Gold, jewel, restoration of jewel. Now the intermittent form called pot or jewel is a manifestation. And because it is a manifestation, world gives a name to it. World gives a form to it. And that name and form is only temporary, because As though a mud once becomes pot, retains a spot forever and it can never become a mud. No, that's not the way world works. If you pound it, it becomes mud again. So, names and the entire prapancha, the universe, including the 14 lokas, base is Brahman. Name and forms come out of Panchikaranam. And they go back again to Brahman, which is the base. So, if you ignore the name and form, which is transient, it gives you the difference between Ishvara and Jiva through this example. There is a toy maker for children. So what does he do? He collects the mud, makes one toy as a horse, one as an elephant, one as a king. So the child assumes this to be an elephant or a horse or a king. Whereas the toy maker knows all of them is just nothing but mud. They manifest as elephant, horse, or as a king. So the toy maker knows. Ishvara knows that everything in this prapancham is just like the toy. It emanates out of Brahman. Ishvara knows it. A jiva, who is the child watching the toy, sees the difference. Oh, this is elephant. Oh, this is horse. This is the king. Because it overlooks the fact that this is a temporary name and form and it is nothing but a mud. When a guru teaches the jiva, no, see this as mud. Don't attach importance to names and forms. It goes back. It becomes Ishvara. So, for a toy maker, he knows mud is the base material. For Ishvara, he knows that Brahman is the base. And for a jiva, like a child, it indulges in happiness, pleasure, pain, and sorrow, cycling in its life, looking at forms and names. Therefore, names and forms should be discarded. How do you discard? Vedanta therefore says, go by the God-created duality, discard names and forms which give you pleasure out of objects. Go to those names and forms which allow you to worship, which allows you to get peace of mind, which allows you to serve a cause. Therefore, see, we can't, okay, we have heard for half an hour names and forms. Chi, boom, ba, all names and forms. I see world as an illusion. It's just not possible. It's not magic. We can understand, but we have to pursue. Hand-holding, hand-held by the guru, we should finally reach the destination. Till such time, duality will exist. So, for us to overlook these names and forms, we should go to form worships go to such names and such forms which cleanses our mind to overlook that name and form subsequently. Therefore, they say, do puja, do sahasranama, utter the name of God, worship the form of God, allow the mind to yoke into it. After reasonable training, when the mind, the dross of the mind gets removed, the guru will then take you over it to say, now you can overlook even this name and form. Because this is also for practice. Once the mind is perfect enough to get into either contemplative mood of yoga or an inquiry mood of jnana, leave it. So name and form has a place in Vedanta. All of us today are ready to learn Vedanta and to get into these two verticals. Unless the mind is firm, steady, a brittle mind can grasp Vedanta, but it cannot practice Vedanta. So for practicing Vedanta, one should either be a karma yogi or a bhaktiman. Unless you show bhakti, perform bhakti. What is karma yoga? Karma yoga is total surrender. Bhakti yoga is total surrender. Karma yoga is total renunciation. The element of I should simply be killed. Whatever I do, whichever work God assigns me, I do it as a service to God. I do it as Ishvara Sankalpam. I do it as an agent. I don't own it. Nor do I own the fruits, because it is only God who can give us fruits. At that moment, what is needed to be done has to be performed as a duty. The mind which performs obligations as duties, and a mind which is ready to renounce the results. These are the two conditions. If you are able to do that and steady your mind with an object to renounce and with an object to serve in a selfless way, then Guru will handhold you and take you to the next path. So, names, forms, and work, Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga are indispensable steps before somebody can get into practical Vedanta. First, this is part of practical Vedanta. Unless we do karmas, unless we do our rituals, unless we do our prayers, the mind from object forms and names should migrate to divine forms and names. It's an essential step in Vedanta. Once it migrates and start doing your work in a selfless manner with the mind to renounce, the mind gets cleansed. Mind which is filled with karmas, mind which is filled with punyas and papas, you will still the mind slowly by saying, let me be indifferent to the pleasures and pains which arise out of these divine forms, names, and work. You will start to become indifferent. See, initially we do prayers and try to derive benefits. But that is good, slightly better than trying to derive pleasures from mundane objects. Derive pleasure from divine objects first. Then even that, your mind after some time will feel enough is enough. Let me do whatever I do for the sake of, as a service to my Guru, for the sake of the society. So, name, form, work, indispensable, and therefore Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga are indispensable. A mind which is so well trained, now the Guru leads you into any one of the two verticals based on your capacity. One is the Yoga Marga, another is the Sankhya Marga, the knowledge. Yoga is normally prescribed by a Guru whose mind is filled with some sort of a pain, pleasure, little bit of dirt, and where it requires stilling the mind. Still. Jnana or inquiring mind is done for one whose mind has reached the conviction that everything in this universe and the body is unreal, and therefore there is duality. What remains ultimately is Brahman. If the thought of the mind is firm over that object, I wouldn't say object, on that truth that Brahman alone exists, then Guru, it's a very tough path. Guru handholds the Shishya and teaches the Jnana Marga. Now, in these two verticals, what do we do as contemplation? Because we need to do it every day in the midst of our work. Both the acharyas are so compassionate that they have picked up verses and stanzas from the Upanishad text, cites it abundantly, and tells you there are several grades of contemplation. An aspirant can start with one first humble step. Of course, blessed by the Guru, after you have reached a good stage of maturity, either in the Bhakti Marga or the Karma Marga. So, Guru will put you that taste into your thought process and say, look here, you have been doing all this very fine. Now, just imagine and believe Brahman alone is Satyam. Get that thought into your mind. You don't have to do anything. First step. What is the first step I have to take in life? When you have faith, fourth step, that faith that Brahman exists, just get into the fifth step of direct knowledge. Start thinking, start connecting, start associating with the thought that Brahman alone exists. Simple connecting point. First connecting point. Thought. From faith, convert it into thought or action. What is the action? You keep working. You do whatever you want to do. Allow the mind to think about that. All right. Vedanta says, our Guru says, Brahman is Satyam. So Brahman is Satyam. Brahman alone is Satyam. That thought. The compassionate Gurus dilute it further. It says, suppose you are not able to get into the thought, aspire to get into the thought. Please aspire. Okay. Aspire. Let me have the aspiration to think that Brahman is Satyam. So 3 stages. Aspiration, grasping that aspiration, and then moving to the 3rd stage of thinking about Brahman Satyam. Without any result or action or without any pala. Simply, you keep working. Mind, see, our mind thinks of several things as we do work. One of the channels now you should open up in your thought process is Brahman is Satyam. Nothing needs to be done. So from aspiration, convert it into grasping. From grasping, convert it into a thought. When you start thinking about it, interferences will be enormous. It's not that easy. So it says, you can even, if you are slightly exposed to Vedic knowledge, Vedic truths, Upanishad truths which you have read so many times, you have listened so many times, it says, if you have that knowledge and background in you, then connect that particular thought. This says, this script says that Brahman is Satyam for this reason. Therefore, connect that thought into that 4th stage. Plain thought. From aspiration, grasping, plain vanilla thought, say, if you have textual knowledge, connect to the textual knowledge which you have said, this text says Brahman is Satyam. So based on that, can you now say Brahman is Satyam? 4th stage. 5th stage. This thought will be interspread, will be part of a huge cesspool. Because our mind is otherwise filled with other thoughts. Vedanta says, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. Continue to relentlessly connect whenever you can. If you are connected 1 second in a day initially, it doesn't matter. It may become a few seconds after a few days. It may become a minute after a few months. It may become a few minutes after a few years. It may become an hour after several decades. It may become a few hours after several janmas. and it may become a flawless flow up. God knows when. Start the process. Somewhere, having taken a human birth, having seen a guru, having associated with a guru, somewhere we have to connect ourselves with this. So, the fourth stage, keep contemplating, and the fifth stage takes you are somewhere in your scheme of thoughts. Somewhere in your scheme of thoughts, this thought should also form part of your scheme. It's not difficult because it doesn't say stop, all of you should now do penance, tapas. No, it doesn't say. These are all preachings for people like us. So in this stage, a fifth stage of make it part of that thought. And Vedanta assures once you make it as integrated part of the thought, then you will find it after some time, without much of efforts, it becomes a habit. And how do you test that it becomes a habit? You will travel with this thought even in your dreams. That's a signal, that's a symptom that you are fairly in stream. Ultimate bottom line is it should be part of the. So, something which was part of the cesspool now has the ability to be cleansing it and becoming part of the thought stream. Something which is part of the thought stream becomes a habit. And something which is a habit demonstrates itself vigorously even in a dream. So you will reach a stage in this pursuit with two diametrically opposite thoughts. A pool of thoughts which leads you to objects and enjoyment, and a pool of thought which says Brahman is Satyam. Vedanta says you will reach this stage where by simply aspiring, which is the first stage, provided Guru Kripai and Guru guidance and your effort based on that guidance. So you will reach a stage where you will have two conflicting thoughts, and it says you can comfortably do your routines in spite of the conflicting thoughts, because at some point of time, the thought about Brahman will overtake the thought over objects. So what is the symptom? What is the symptom? A jewel or a gem which pleased you so much. When you reach this stage, it will make you to think slightly, that it will make you to look at the same object indifferently and dispassionately. It might not have moved out of your scheme of thoughts or a stream of thoughts, but the sense of possessiveness, attachment, delusion, desire, anger for non-possession, it will slowly die. So it will reach a stage where things to which you are so attached, you will slowly start releasing that attachment. The bandha between the objects of enjoyment and your mind will slowly get disengaged. Then you will see a stage where somebody was asking me the question in the afternoon, what do you do with the mind and body? You will have to use the same equipments. The mind and the buddhi, which use the sensory organs and the karmendriyas to do work outside. The mind and the buddhi will now start thinking, oh my God, let me not be belayed, let me not be deceived by the reflected self, which is not the true self. Very same mind and buddhi will start telling you. It says, reflected self is not the true self. So, a mind which was going outward 180 degrees, 365 days, 24/7. So, its mind, sensory objects, Brahman. It will oscillate till the end. But at some stage, the pendulum will start moving only in one particular direction. Provided the intensity of the thought intensifies. And Vedanta says, if you are sincere and devoted, it will intensify. And from there, once we are all matured enough to get into that stage of thought process, yoga takes over. Guru will guide you how to do worship in forms, the Bahirmukha Puja, how to do Antarmukha Puja. You should read Multifaceted Jivan Mukta, all of you. How Jyeshta Mahasannidhanam visualized so many forms for contemplation. And at some stage, the forms will change on its own. You don't visualize. You don't go and sit and say, I want this form. The form will come to you. On a particular meditation course, for a day or 1.5 days, he saw 8 forms of Krishna. And he had a slight element of doubt. Was this hallucination or real? He did not even place it before Jagadguru Srimad Chandrasekhara Bharati Mahaswami. He did not even go to his Guru to ask, because he was thinking about it. When he met his Guru in the afternoon on a particular day, Acharya said, go and bring Vishnu Puranam. It's there in my shelf. So Vishnu Puranam is brought. Now Acharya has flagged a particular page. He gave it to Jyeshta Mahasannidhanam and said, please read it. To his utter surprise, divine surprise, Jyeshta Mahasannidhanam finds the 8 forms of Krishna appearing in the same order. And Jagadguru Srimad Chandrasekhara Bharati Mahaswami will ask, I think you had contemplated on all these forms in this sequence. Am I right? He contemplates sitting somewhere near Kalabhairava temple. Acharya is sitting in Guru Nivas. Each one has not spoken about this with the other. Says, bring the book, read it, this. And it clarifies. You had an iota of doubt as to whether it is hallucination. It is not hallucination. It is real. And Shiva after some time states, from tomorrow you shall now do contemplation in the formless. Savikalpa Samadhi. And then you go to Nirvikalpa Samadhi and then you attain the stage of Jivan. What is Nirvikalpa Samadhi? What is Samadhi? The mind which was filled with filth over material objects. See the 180 degrees U-turn. A mind which is filled with filth can be stilled in such a way that the mind can one and only think about Brahman. Imagine, it is possible. It is possible for every human being. Potentiality is there, subject to kleshas, subject to kamas, krodhas. So, from this end, which was the mind dedicated to objects and ignored Brahman, the mind will transform and think only about Brahman and ignore objects. Imagine the state. Jyeshta Mahasannidhanam describes Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Oh my God, you should read it. I can't explain it. It's an experience. Imagine a place, and he sits and he thinks only of Brahman. Everything gets destroyed in front of his eyes. The wall before him vanishes. decimates. Because Brahman doesn't need time. Brahman doesn't need space. Brahman doesn't need cause. It's beyond that. Duality starts only with these three to begin with. So, this is one marga Panchadasi reaches to an aspirant. Other marga is jnana. What do you do with jnana? Jnana, the mind must be so powerful, must have that innate strength to keep discriminating material things quite easily. When it sees a stone, the mind should say, hey, this is Maya, the hardness of a stone. You find Maya as hardness. It is the hardness which keeps the stone together. If it sees water, it should say fluidity is the Maya, is the potency. Yeah, Maya as fluidity emanates in water. It holds water together, water particles together. If it's fire, it will see, well, the heat out of the fire is the potency of that fire. This is the kind of training the mind should be capable of. If it sees an inert object, it should see, hey, come on, this is nothing but a reflection of existence. For which Vedanta prescribes certain conceptual understanding of the universe. Someone can understand the universe in any one of the three forms. Somebody can say, universe is a creation, a beginning from A to B. Which means cotton becoming cloth. Once cotton becomes cloth, then you don't find cotton again there. It has already become a cloth. So in change, you will see displacement. One will erode and the other would emerge. Now the second will be, this is beginning. This is beginning. In changing, you will see milk becoming curd and you cannot reverse the process again. Once it becomes a curd, then you can't restore the process as milk. Now the third is seeming. You see a rope and you imagine it's a snake in a semi-darkness. You see a jewel, you should be able to see only the gold in it and ignore the name and form. So of the three types, changing, a beginning, changing, and seeming, a trained mind, a tough, strong mind, if it is able to see everything in this world as seeming, whatever it sees, it should be able to discriminate. Oh my God, this is seeming, it is illusion. It's just a name and a form. Ignore it. There is only Brahman behind it. Seeing a pot, it should see mud. Seeing a jewelry, it should see only gold. If the mind is matured enough to train itself into this stage, then Vedanta says, then you are fit to pursue the Jnana Marga. What happens? When you see a stone, you see the hardness. When you see water, you see the... It says, nothing will shock that mind. Remember, a drop of semen becomes a human baby. Somebody delivers a child, a mother delivers a child on a drop of a semen. How is this possible here? How, you can say, science can say how the embryo grows. Science can say that. But how can science say, why not your science, instead of semen, you put something else and the embryo will go? It's not able to do that. That is the limitation of science. Science is subservient to Maya's power. See, two things. A Vedanta, a person who, aspirant who pursues the Jnana Marga will know two things very clearly. He or she will say, Brahman is unthinkable. My buddhi or mind is incapable of comprehending Brahman. Unthinkable, unimaginable. And he also concede to the fact, Maya, which is the potency of Brahman, is unthinkable and unimaginable. A tree with roots down and leaves up, if it appears upside down, a Vairagi, a man who is in the Jnana Marga, will not be astonished at all seeing such a tree. It's possible. Because Maya is capable of doing anything. Nothing is impossible for a Jnani. Because it's like this. In your dream, do you have a control over the dream to have a choice of particular sequence? Or tomorrow, once I sleep, I must have only this dream, and in this sequence, I want to watch a film for 2 hours in a dream. So many things, impossible things happen in a dream. When it can happen in a dream as an illusion, a Jnani will know the whole comedy that is happening, the catastrophe and the chaos and the friction and the motion and the heat and the light that is getting generated in this universe is nothing but a divine drama. As you see a screen, see, every time they say, when it comes to Mahasannidhanam, they always say he's a Jnani. And he sits in Guru Bhavanam and gives you darshanam. It's like watching a TV. He's watching all of us as we watch a television program. Completely detached. Nothing can shock him. Because he's indifferent. Whatever you say will not shock him. Oh, yeah. Because for a Jnani, in a world of Maya, in a world of illusion, in a world of game, anything can happen there. You can't say this should happen in a right way, this is topsy-turvy. Where is the rule? Because for a Jnani, this world is also a dream, as equivalent to a dream. When there is no scientific progression or a scheme in a dream, why should there be so in the world? We need it for dharmic reason. We need it for our existence, coexistence, peace is all something in the dual world. For a Jnani is beyond that. Whether the world is at peace or world is at war, he is just not bothered. Because he is above that. We need peace because we don't war, because war gives us unhappiness. And that's why every time, see, delusion, we talked about delusion, I should extend it to one more. Every mind which is desirous of objects will have to ultimately weep. That is a clear sanction by Vedanta. You have to reach a stage of weeping. So, avert that stage. Delusion leads to weeping. Therefore, avert that situation. So, for a Jnani, like a toy maker knows all the toys he has made is out of mud, a Jnani knows names and forms have absolutely no role to play. In anything and everything, he will go back to the root to say what is the base and associate that base as the potency and associate that Maya in that base as nothing but a manifestation of Brahman. Simple. Simple. He will associate it only that way. So, yoga or jnana, we can't toss the coin and say, from tomorrow I'll practice yoga, day after tomorrow I'll practice. You can understand. It's all good. You can understand. It's a waiting game. It's a patient waiting game. The Guru has to choose. The Guru has to first place us whether we are not even entered the gates of bhakti. And we think we are all jnanis by understanding Bhagavad Gita. Then we are actually making a mistake of wasting our precious time, the precious birth. Any amount of understanding, any amount of clarity will not translate into experience, will not translate into pursuit. And what is more important is pursuit. You take 2 steps. We take 2 steps in this birth. It's worthy. Acharya always says, look, take the story of an ant. An ant starts moving. It moves very, very slowly. But remember, it starts moving. And Vedanta assures, once you start moving, we will ensure that you move from where you stopped in the next birth. It's not that you have to restart the race from the starting point. That assurance is given. Wherever you stop, your next birth, you can carry on from there. It says, if you are a yogi but born with a when you die with desires, you will be born in a wealthy family. If you die without aspirations and still not become a Jivan Mukta, you will go into a family of yogis. It prescribes what will be your next birth. It assures. And therefore, the science of jnana, becoming knowledgeable, realizing Brahman as a jnani, these are the paths. This is how you should be. I'm just putting it very briefly because of time constraint. It gives a list how to see existence in what. If you see a stone, see its inertness, then you will understand existence. How to see consciousness, it gives you a list. How to see Ananda, it gives you all in daily routines. All in daily routines. So, these are the 2 paths. And finally, both these paths, because both yoga and Sankhya leads you to the same destination, Jivan Mukta, Mukti, bliss. Now, we have used this word bliss several times. But what is bliss? What do you mean by bliss? It's a state where you will not suffer from sorrow eternally thereafter. So now go back to Anandamaya Kosha, sleep. Why do we say peaceful sleep? Because you don't suffer sorrow there. We don't suffer pain. We don't suffer disgust, anger, vengeance, vindictiveness, kindness, affection, call positive, everything. Nothing exists there. No emotions exist there. No sensation exists there. Just peace, just bliss. And it is free from sorrow. What we achieve in Anandamaya every night and return back to the waking stage and get back to our mind and buddhi and start working into our karmas, draws us back into the material world. You conquer that, you can be simply in eternal bliss with no sorrow. This is the purpose of life, says Vedanta. Once you reach, it catalogs a list of things which you will be different from the rest. Just to cite one, you will become a fearless person. In one of the politicians, in one of the Anugraha Bhashanams, when he attended, he put this question to Acharya. We see a lot of threats in our lives. How can we conquer fear of death? Acharya said, I'm so sorry I have to disappoint you because the answer is only in Vedanta. Only a Jivan Mukta can be fearless. You can see instance after instance in the life history of the Sringeri Acharyas. Now we are seeing the puja in Guru Bhavanam. Those are all days, 100, 150 years. Tigers will come. It's a forest. It will attend the puja and go. It will simply squat. For some time it will go. When Sachidananda Sivarsi Bharati, because it's Mysore, is basically Advaita Academy is from Mysore, 33rd Acharya is from Mysore. He is conducting a classes, he sat on a palaga, on a pita. A snake goes through it. He gently slants his asana and allows the snake to gently pass through. When Jyeshta Mahasannidhanam is in trance in Kalabhairava Kovil, a serpent just hugs, goes around his neck, and it raises his hood, and then slowly cuddles his cheek. And when he returns back to Narasimhavana, Jagadguru Srimad Chandrasekhar Bharati Mahaswami will ask, hey, so you had an experience, you had been a Bhujanga Bhushana for a while, I think. Acharya said, yes. You will never have fear, because fearfulness comes only out of duality. So several such examples are given to us to say what. So you will be, somebody was asking, what do you do with why should the Jivan Bhukta need mind and body? Very simple. Screening disappears with acquisition of knowledge. Distraction, or else the projection, disappears and liquidates only due to prarabdha. So when somebody attains Jivan Mukta, the Sanchita karma and Agami will go, but prarabdha karma will stay in that body, mind and intellect and discharge its prarabdha indifferently, and the mortal coil will be thrown one fine day. As Jagadguru Srimad Chandrasekhar Bharati Swami threw it in the Tunga, early in the morning, sitting in the Padmasana pose. It doesn't matter whether it exists or not, but it has to exhaust its prarabdha. That's the answer to that question raised in the morning. So, whether you are active, you have no obligation to be active, doesn't mean you should be inactive. You can, if somebody says pleasurable things, oh, you are entitled to. Somebody says, oh, Acharya will shrink it. Nothing matters. Nothing binds them. There are no rules. Nothing applies, because rules apply only to including Vedas, apply only to the world of duality. Then why should Acharya hold to the Vedas? Because he is not just a tapasvi, a Jivan Mukta in isolation. He also sits on a pitam to help and emancipate Sishyas, and therefore he has to do this. And therefore Shankara has prescribed. Adi Shankara has prescribed the traditions, customs and values. What should this pitam do to its Sishyas? And every guru has to uphold to that tradition. Yesterday I was clarifying it to somebody. When Sannidhanam came to the Peetham and did the first Chandramaulishwara Puja, after the Abhishekam, he took the linga and he took that white cloth from and then spread it. Mahasannidhanam said, spread it fully. Minutest details will be replicated as tradition. Nothing will change. When Jyeshta Mahasannidhanam put the roses to the Chandramaulishwara linga, we thought how does it like a magnet go on stick? Have we not watched Mahasannidhanam doing it? Are we not watching Sannidhanam doing it now? Only that name, body and form will disappear and another will manifest. But Brahmasurupam, Sakshat Brahmasurupam will travel in the same way and give you the same dispensation. Without the words used, the expressions used will be repeated. You will see a monotony which is not frustrating or disturbing. It is a divine monotony because Brahman, this is the state a jnani can reach with the guidance of a guru. I think I need to leave. So if I have any questions, I can take it, or else with a couple of questions then I can.
Thank you so much for this wonderful session. We have a couple of questions. Am I not audible?
No, you're audible.
Okay. Yeah, there are a couple of questions. When everything is revolving around Guru, how to find a Guru? Or is that if we start walking, we somehow get Guru? Not all will be fortunate to have close contact of such realized Gurus. So how to proceed?
our scriptures give one assurance. Be genuine. Get the tapam of somehow getting to a guru. Have that tapam in you. See, Acharya in the Rameshwaram speech, 2012 Rameshwaram speech, in his Anugraha Bhashanam says, see, the sanctity of Rameshwaram is so unique. It is a Kshetram where Rama and Shiva, in two different forms, they are only same Brahman in same form. But for manifestation purposes, there is a divinity, unity of divinity and sacredness to that place. And while explaining it, Acharya says in the Anugraha Bhashanam, so many are there in Rameshwaram. People from a remote corner in North India aspires, somehow I should see Rameshwaram in my life. People in some corner of Kerala aspire, somehow I must have a holy dip in Triveni. But people in Rameshwaram may not go to the temple at all. This is the beauty of Maya. So, somebody sitting in the northeastern corner of India aspiring to go to Rameshwaram, and somebody in the tip of Kanyakumari or Kerala aspiring to go to Triveni will one day reach Triveni, will one day reach Rameshwaram. So, you cannot choose a guru. Guru is not a choosable object. Guru has to choose us. So, two answers are there. A, aspire for it, think of it. One day or the other, you will, even last year, at least three people who had contacted me, say, Acharya came in, one in Vaisakapatnam, another in Kadapa, one in interior Karnataka. Acharya came in a dream and I want to go. I said, why should you ask me? Who am I? He has come in your dream. Rush. Don't waste 1 minute. 2020, I am citing instances. People reaching the lotus and they go and stand. One of the man who went from Kadapa gave a call to me from Shingeri. He was standing in it was a Sunday, completely crowded. Mahasannidhanam, he was afraid whether Mahasannidhanam will notice him. It was so crowded. He says, he was standing in the queue in Guru Bhavanam. Acharya saw him. He has not seen Acharya. Acharya has not seen him physically. He sees him and gave such a sweet divine smile. He was stuck. He got the first sense of assurance. Acharya is going to see us somehow. Sit in the corner of the Guru Bhumi, he gives him a smile. Somebody who came in his dream. So that is one way. Another way is all of us have a Kula Guru, Kula Devam. It's in a tradition. I think a practitioner of Sanatana Dharma can never say how to find a Guru. I don't have a Guru. It's an answer which is unacceptable. We belong to a Paramparya where our Kula Devam and Kula Guru is already determined. So go and catch hold of their feet. That is all.
Wonderful, wonderful. The next question is, as a beginner in Vedanta, can I read Multifaceted Jivan Mukta book? How would I prepare my mind to read it?
No, these types of questions, I am not an evolved soul or a mukta to guide you. To be very honest, I can only share. You must understand, I speak as a struggling soul as much as you are. We sail in the same boat. So I am incapable of giving guidance. But I can tell you, my experience when I read Jivan, Multifaceted Jivan, that is something I can share. When I read Yoga and Enlightenment 25 years back, I felt it was a fictional story. Let me not shy away from the truth.
Yes.
I have done that papa to my Guru. But Guru is the ocean of compassion. He allowed me to read Multifaceted Jivan Mukta in 2017. That is the kindness of Guru. And fiction became a fact to me. This is the karunyam every Guru imparts to his Shishya. So, please take it seriously and read it. Guru is there to guide you. He will give you the experience and feeling. I can't give you, I can't even share. You may be more evolved and a superior soul. You may get a better experience than me. Who knows where our power lies? Only a guru can answer this. But please read it. Please read it.
Thank you. Another question is, while we perform official duties, we have to overcome many moral and ethical aspects. How do we go about that?
Yeah. I have myself asked this question with my guru. He has said only two things to me, which I have been following till date. Your morals is your capability. It is not somebody's capability. So if you want to be ethical, if you want to practice integrity, it is within your reach to practice. But you have to align with somebody's morals and integrity. You don't worry about that. It is his moral and his or her moral and integrity in a system. You are not there to go and preach. See, who can preach? Only somebody who has divine power can preach. Only then that will translate, that will have an effect. Otherwise, you can only be giving advice. People will hear it in one ear and leave it through the other ear. True. So don't preach there. If you are part of a quagmire, of a cesspool or a big system, you maintain your values. That is within your reach. Don't aspire to become something else by compromising those values. That is within your reach. And if the system is so desperate that if you practice, they will throw you out, then whatever you have to yield it for the sake of the system, not for your personal benefit. Okay. Am I clear?
Yes, you're very clear. Yeah. We have final question. Can you please throw some light on last 5 chapters of Panchadashi, which are really heavy on yoga? What is the best perspective to look at it?
In fact, this afternoon session, I have spoken only about the 5 chapters. It talks about most heaviest things on jnana and most heaviest things on yoga. I don't deny it. But it also talks about, in the earlier chapters, about contemplation as part of our daily routine. So, you start with, if you have not achieved that scale of perfection, first read the anterior chapters on contemplation and aspire that. And translate that contemplation into your daily routines and see where it takes you. Other than this, I cannot, I'm nobody to advise. It is good you can read these 5 chapters any number of times. It may give you a spark. But we are all in daily routines. We don't have the ability to do tapas. Samadhi means, can you sit and only meditate on Brahman and leave everything else? Are you in that state? For which you must know what that state and experience is by reading Multipath Jivan. Yes. You will see the velocity, the magnitude, the richness, the limitless of that prayer, that state of mind. So we are all in daily routines. So easy contemplation should be the marga which we should try, is the suggestion given by Panchadasi, which I am not suggesting anything to anyone. I am not a guru. I am an aspirant. So this is a suggestion given.
Thank you so much, Venkatramanji. We come to a conclusion of this session, 2 sessions. Your deep Guru Bhakti that you have for Jagadgurus can be motivation to all of us. While you talk, it reflects so much. From the entire team of Advaita Academy, we are very grateful to have you here, and we thank you immensely for agreeing to come on our platform and speak on Panchadashi as a daily practice routine. Thank you so much.
I must also thank you and Nitin and Advaita Academy and all the supporters of Advaita Dharma for having patiently spent some time with this. Let me offer both the talks at the lotus feet of my Guru, Jagadguru, Shri Bharti Tirtha Mahaswamigal, and Sannidhanam Jagadguru, Shri Vidhushekara Bharti Mahaswamigal, and do it as a Samarpanam at their lotus feet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.